Hey, welcome to the Strategic Success Podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Fricky. Thanks for tuning in. If you're interested in learning how to buy a property subject to the existing loan, as a real estate investor, look, if someone hasn't told you already, it's a bit complicated. There's a lot of moving parts, and I have investors calling me all the time, messaging me saying, Courtney, how do I do this? And I promise you, there's just not enough time to really share as much as I can. And so because of that, I created a workshop, and I'm looking forward to doing that here coming up soon. So join me March 15th in the greater New Orleans area. I'm doing my Safe Subject to class. This is where I deep dive the topic of Subject to, everything from the process, the paperwork, the due diligence, the numbers, all of those things. I'm sharing case studies. I'm sharing it all. And if you attend, not only in person do you get lunch, but you also get a manual. These manuals are 150 plus pages long, where I share everything that I know on Subject to. So get your ticket today, CourtneyFricky.com. You can get both an in-person or a virtual ticket. And as well as everyone who gets a ticket, you're also going to get access to a free 2-day course called Mastering Creative Deals with Real Estate Agents that I've done. That's going to have its own recordings, its own manual that you'll be able to get to watch those on your own time. All right, guys, make sure you get a ticket. See you in New Orleans, March 15th for Safe Subject to. All right, friends, welcome to another episode of the Strategic Success Podcast. I'm excited. I've got my good friend Lindsey Jensen here. Lindsey's based out of Colorado, which is those markets there are a higher cost of living. It could be prohibitive, some people would say, on the investing side, but she has a fantastic strategy on really how she's been able to successfully do this business and also do it successfully in a short amount of time and find financial freedom. So, Lindsey, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
Yeah, look, I always enjoy spending time with you, talking shop. So let's kind of give people, we have too much fun together. Let's give people an introduction. Let's get like a 30,000 foot view of your journey in real estate. How long have you been in it? What strategies have you tackled? And let's kind of go from there.
So, okay. I've been in this will be like my 9th year. I built $10 million portfolio within my first 6 years. So just to give people an idea how fast they can build it, don't put off for some day, because in 6 years you could be there, right? I started I knew I wanted to be a buy and hold investor. So I didn't go out there looking to wholesale, sale, or flip. My first strategies were, the first house I got was seller financed, 0%. And moved on from there to, I dove in headfirst into Subject to. So meaning,
buying,
taking over the loans, not assuming, but taking over the loans of other people and then renting them out long term. So that's where I really got my feet wet. And then along the way, just added stuff as it came at me, right? So learned the Subject to, already had some seller finance, got better at both of those things, and then also did lease purchases, which are similar to lease options. Started doing some flips, right? So just added things as I needed them. I didn't do a ton of flips. It was just as needed if they were really, really good. And then master leasing.
Yeah. Well, we're going to spend the majority of time on that last one, the master leasing, but you're predominantly buy and hold. And, you were able in those first 6 years to build a portfolio that, a $10 million portfolio. I know from our interactions together, you spend how much time each week working on your real estate stuff?
Well, just on taking care of the houses, maybe 2 hours a week. Okay. So just taking care of my portfolio is maybe 2 hours a week. That doesn't include tax time or any of those other times when there's extra stuff going on, but on a regular basis, about 2 hours a week. Yep.
And so you, my friend, have mastered systems and really automating, because you're a busy mom as well, right?
Yeah.
Like, you don't want the real estate to take from, your life. You want it to add to it, right? And so I've always loved that. So let's kind of dive into, master leasing. There's a very Most people are like, okay, I don't know what that is. You actually probably already do. You just know the YouTube slang for it, which is rental arbitrage. And
Yep.
so, you know, I don't even know. I don't even know, Lindsay. I don't know how long rental arbitrage has been around, but it's been a few years.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, someone coined it somewhere, right? But do you want to explain in theory what, rental arbitrage or a master lease is?
It's super simple. So let's say I rent a house that you own from you. I would rent it from you and then I'm going to go sublease it to somebody else,
Yeah,
obviously with your permission and the paperwork and all that. So
yeah.
the way I do it long term, some people actually feel like it's very similar to property management. The only difference is they find that they like it better because of some of the protections that I can provide. A lot of times they have a lot less to do,
Yeah.
because I don't want to say more power, but they give me more power because they don't want to deal with it, right?
Well, you've got more of a financial incentive,
I do.
yeah, than a
Yeah,
property manager. Property manager is getting paid for a service, um, a fee or percentage, but
correct.
you're actually earning your your spread
Yeah, I'm
through
taking,
performing.
yep, exactly. I take a spread and then, but I have the right to purchase this house potentially down the line. So I have some ownership potential in
Yeah.
all of the houses that I master lease. And that's awesome. And
Yeah.
so it you're exactly right. It gives me reason to take better care of the house, I feel, than a lot of other people do.
Versus, in the property management game, look, I hire a handful of property managers myself.
Mhm.
There is as third party, I have different ones for different locations, different type of assets, different things like that. The reality is that, you know, that business often really only makes sense if they're doing volume, or it's supplementing other income.
Mhm. Well, yeah, and it is hard to profit if you're not if you're in it for the right reasons, the way I do it, and the potential that can come out of it, then yes, there's lots and lots of benefit there. Also, when you put the right systems into place, it makes your life easy, and that extra income is just wonderful. The way that property management as a whole is taught, it is taught to fee everybody to death. There's literal like classes out there that teach you all the different ways in which people can be feed to death, not only on the owner side, but also on the tenant side. And that's how
And
they make their living.
and truly it's like they need to have more doors that they're managing because, let's just say for easy numbers, $1,000 a month, 10%, that's $100. That
Mhm.
ain't gonna pay for nothing, right? You
Oh,
need you need 100 of those, right? For it to make sense. And so I know that sometimes, like, that's the downside. Either
yeah.
you're going to have a property manager that has a ton of, basically clients, and so you hope they have the proper systems and things like that, and good service, or you have someone that only does a few, but then they're basically, it doesn't make enough money, so then they do something else as well. um you know Basically they're doing it part-time. So all right, let's kind of jump into, master leasing. So this is, renting a property from someone with the right to sublet it. When it comes down to this, I think that there's some common, a lot of people have heard of the rental arbitrage, and I think that there's some misconceptions. I want to kind of dive into these, and then I want to kind of hear some case studies of some deals that you've done and some things like that. But the most common master lease scenario people talk about is, hey, I'm going to go to this apartment complex. They have some vacancies. Let me offer to rent from them with the right to sublet. And then I'm going to bring in some furniture and I'm going to do a short-term rental, midterm rental, something like that. What are some of the misconceptions and issues with that from your experience?
I mean, a lot of people I mean, some people have been very, very successful doing that. And I don't even know if it's mostly apartments that they're doing it in. I mean, people do it in mountain towns with
Yeah.
cabins. They do it in, we live in Colorado, so they do it in all of the surrounding cities around here. It's a wonderful way to make a really good living for a lot of people. So, um, that is definitely a route to go, but it is considered an earned income. It's not a passive income like master leasing is when you do it long term. And the nice thing for if you do it the right way, you can still have the potential of having the first right of refusal to purchase those properties down the road. If you do it the right way. But let me kind of back up here. I think some of those can be really good. You know, a girl that took my class, she decided to do master leasing or rental arbitrage, whichever way you want to put it. And she has retired herself from her job. She got, I think, 12 units in the first year this way.
Wow.
And some of them were purchased and some of them were just, she rented them from other people. And she literally just called units, you know, properties from Zillow, said,
Yeah.
hey, how about if I lease it at your price? But here's what I'm doing. And then she short-termed them out. She paid for all the furniture, all of that. So I think maybe the biggest misconception is that it's either hard to do or that that's the only thing you can do, but
Yeah.
it's
We're
not.
going to get into that second part, that it's the only, because I want to share how you're doing it, because you're not doing that model, are you?
No, not at all. Too much work for
Yeah.
me.
Well, I think one of the big things is you have a lot of people who are in trouble right now because of regulations, right? Now, if someone's wanting to get into a short-term rental, I think one of the best ways they can get into it is through a master lease, the rental arbitrage master lease, and work their way into ownership. Because there's so many people right now who got into properties for a short-term rental, and because of regulation change or the occupancy isn't what it was supposed to be, they're not getting what they were supposed to get. And so it's a lot easier to get out of a lease than it is to get out of a deed,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And
Well,
so
then you can see
there's
if you
something
even
there.
like it because you may get into this and decide you absolutely dislike this. So there you've already bought a property and you're stuck doing this because you can't
Yeah.
afford, maybe you can't afford someone to do it for you or whatever the case may be. But yeah, I mean, first of all, make sure that you like doing it, whichever way that you move forward in doing it. And second of all, I think, you know, over the last year, I've had so many people call me and ask if I can help with renting their property long term. And the numbers don't even come close to making sense because they've done exactly what you said, Courtney. And most of the time, they didn't know. I mean, this is what's crazy. They didn't even know there were rules and regulations and that they weren't able to get a license to do it. They thought they could just buy whatever and make
Yeah.
it happen. There was no thought of going in and making sure the numbers work. There was no thought of going in and saying, hey, is there a license
Yeah.
that I need to be aware of? Is there any kind of regulation I need to be aware of? They just bought and then worried about it later, and people are getting really hurt by that.
Yeah, I mean, here in New Orleans, that we have, pretty strong regulation. You can't even enter something in on Airbnb unless you have the permit
Yep.
number. You literally cannot put it on there. At least not for the nightly and weekly. It would have to be a minimum 30 days. So, I mean,
Yep.
that stuff's important. So we see a lot of people who speculated and basically they're like, oh yeah, I hear that you can get rich, making all this money with short-term rentals. Let me just go buy a property, but not really learn the ins and outs. But one of the things that, I guess the misconception is like that the only way to do it is buy and then do this higher cash flow thing, which love, short-term rentals and all that. You guys, again, I think some people have done it well, but it's like there's some people who they only think that that's the only route is this higher cash flow, riskier play, for example, that may have regulations that impact it or whatnot. And then plus you have to come up, you don't even own a property and you're having to come up with, a good amount of money to furnish them, right? Like, but then it's not something, it's not a property you actually own. So you need that cash coming, whether it's from a credit card, from your own pocket, or, because it's not like you have a deed that you can collateralize
Yep.
for that. So, okay. So getting away from the short-term rental, I think that's the most common view of this is just at least, rent it and then do the short-term rental. And we're seeing some people that did this, but then now they're having to cancel their rental arbitrage, their master leases because, regulation just dropped down and they can no longer do these. So let's talk about the model that you do, which is first time I heard about it years ago, never crossed my mind that this was an option. Can you explain your main model with master leases?
Yep. literally you talk, the owner usually the owner calls me and asks for some help with their property. That could be because they either want to sell or they know they want to rent it and they've heard from other people to call me. So it could be either one of those things. So let's go the first route, which is they've called me because they want to rent it, they want to keep their property. Then I go ahead and sign a lease with them long term, like usually between 5 and 10 years.
Wow.
So I don't know. I every once in a while I'll do it year by year, just depending on what their thoughts are. But
Yeah.
most of the time I get a minimum of a 5 year lease on these. The interesting thing is in certain parts of the country, I'm just gonna swirl this for a second. So in certain parts
Sure.
of the country, they're complaining about the tenant laws, and I do too sometimes. But
I
sometimes you
mean,
can,
you had some major changes in Colorado
yes.
recently.
But
So,
here's a cool thing. Um, they cannot get rid of me if I don't want to be gotten rid of. Would I do that to somebody? Probably not, right? But with the laws, if I want to continue doing what I'm doing, unless they choose to sell their property, they have to stick with me, which is insane. But if I'm not doing anything wrong, if I'm taking good care of things,
right.
you can use those kinds of things to your advantage. And I'm not saying go out there and
Screw people over.
things and screw people over, because I can't even imagine myself telling someone who didn't want to work with me too bad, right? It's just too easy to get a good property that you get along with the owner on.
Well, but if you ever, for example, had something going on with the city, you could go in there wearing your tenant hat versus your
Exactly.
landlord hat, right?
Exactly.
You could be like, "Hey, look, I'm renting this property." Like, and I'm not saying necessarily like it could be something, for example, with the city, like an HOA or whatever, not even just with the homeowner, right?
Well, it could
Um,
help the homeowner out by wearing your tenant
exactly. Right.
100%
Yeah,
with
because in certain
the
areas,
owner. Yeah.
yeah, in certain areas, like if you're an owner, you can suffer. But oh my gosh, don't let the tenant suffer.
Yep.
Uh,
100%.
so okay, so you rent out a property, generally long term from someone, and with the right to sublet, so they know that you're going to be finding tenants, and that tenant's going to be renting from you.
Now, a lot of people think, well, what do you do if there's no income coming in? Or what do you do if this happens or that happens? Well, my lease says that the owner gets 90, most of the time. There's lots of different leases that we can do, okay? I'm just
Yep.
going to go down one road. Most of my leases are performance leases, which means my rent is 90% of whatever I bring in. Or
Okay, so
whatever
if
number
the
you want to
rent's
put there. I could put it's 50% of whatever I bring in is my rent to them.
yeah.
Okay.
So
85%. So whatever that number is, I'm just throwing out a number right now. But
yeah.
um,
So for example, if rent is $1,000 and so you're bringing in 1,000, so then your rent is going to be 90% of that. So 900 is what's going to go to them.
correct.
Yeah.
Yep. And there
And
might be
so by performance, if you're not receiving any rent,
there is
then
no
they don't,
rent due.
yeah. So
Yep.
do you find, let's kind of go over that objection. Do you find that that is that owners object to that pretty often?
Not at all, because there's a lot of property managers out there where if there's no rent coming in, they still owe the monthly fee.
Yep. I just left a lunch earlier today where it's like this multifamily unit is owing this management. They're switching. It was a property manager and he was getting a new client and it was just like they're paying out the wazoo every month and there's literally no rent coming in. And he's
What?
like, I can't, like you're
How does
draining.
that entice someone to even get a renter in there? They're like, I'm getting paid either way, whatever. Like, don't
Right.
get me wrong. I know a lot of property managers and I know a lot of good property managers and people that I really respect the crap out of. So I'm not talking smack. I'm just saying that a lot of their fee structures sometimes are not beneficial for the owner.
Well, and then obviously there are going to be those that abuse things. There's always going to be bad faith actors, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and so I get that. So okay, so you're predominantly doing these performance leases where hey, the owner is going to get paid based on if there's someone in there.
Yep.
Obviously, you're incentivized to put someone in there.
Mhm.
And there is a level that and you're doing just long-term rentals. You're not furnishing them, you're not doing short-term rentals, midterm rentals. And so then you're going out and putting long-term tenants in there. And you really specialize. How would you classify yourself? Like when you're like introducing yourself. So you're not,
Professional landlord.
yeah. Okay, because you're not a property manager, but in
No,
essence, you do a lot of the roles of a property manager, but
correct.
you're not one. Why is it important to distinguish between those?
Well, first of all, in many places, you can get fined because if you're not licensed, you cannot be a property manager. So you have to be very careful of your language when you're doing this, right? Um,
Yeah.
and also, I want to distinguish myself apart from a property manager because I'm so much more than that.
Well, it's part of your pitch, right? Like I'm
100%.
because it's like one model is, to manage a property yourself. Another model is to hire a property manager, but then a third model that no one ever hears about is you could master lease to an experienced investor who's a professional landlord.
Yep, absolutely. Let me give you an example. So let's say someone calls me and wants to sell their home. Maybe they're in trouble. Maybe they're underwater. Maybe they owe too much on their property to sell it. Maybe they can't even rent it for what they owe or for what their monthly payment is, I should say. Well, I actually have a solution for some of those people.
Okay.
I can say, listen, your payment is $2,000 a month. We can
Hmm.
only rent this for $2,000 a month. You don't want to lose $200 a month to a property manager plus whatever else it may cost.
Right.
What if I rent this from you? My rent to you will be 100% of anything that I bring in. You will get 100% of that. So all of your rent or your mortgage will be covered in exchange for some ownership percentage in the house.
Do you ever get people push back and they're like, "Who are you?" And do you ever get any like objection to that?
I mean, not outright, really. I tell them, go do some research. I understand this is not the ideal situation for you. Like, and I never paint people into a corner. They're just there, right? I don't
Right,
push
like here's your options. It's
them.
not
They
it's not
already
it's
know.
not everyone's first option, but
They already
it is
know where they're
a
at. Yeah. And half the time they've already talked to real estate agents. They understand their options with property managers, and property managers are not going to work for free. So
Yep.
my option is I'll work for free in exchange for some ownership on the back end.
So, and that's a percentage of, or is that like the right to buy it in the future? Or,
It could be any of those. It's whatever you want to work with them.
yeah.
It could
And
be like, let's say it's 5 years that you plan on taking care of it. In that time, you think there's going to be enough equity for them to sell it. It could be that you put a note on their property for, say, let's say over that 5 years, you would have earned $12,000. And at the end of that 5 years, because you've waited, you want 25 instead of the 12.
they could pay you back when they sell.
Yep, so you actually could put a number to it if you want, or you could say a percentage of the profits or some combination of both, right? So you could say, I want my 25,000 plus half of this amount.
Yeah. And that's where the creative deal structuring can be very strong because it's like,
Yeah.
especially in this market right now, I'm like, I don't know about you, and I do believe that this is your scenario, but for me, I'm most people's last resort. I'm like, look, you've already checked out all these other things. And I'm like, look, half of my phone calls are like, hey, let's spitball some ideas. In the event that I could do this, would you be open to it? And if not, like, I'm going to shake your hand and wish you well.
Yep.
But it's usually the more traditional options are not viable to them. And this is where I tell my real estate friends, my realtor friends, I say, hey, look, the MLS has its role in the industry, but there's a role in which the MLS, is not the best fit for everyone, although it is a good fit for 90+% of people, right? Like maybe even 95+% of people. But there is a small subsect of people that, just listing their house for sale, they're gonna have to bring money to the table. It's, yeah, it might be a short sale, it might be this, but people like, hey, I can't lose my job. I can't, like that's gonna doing a short sale is gonna impact my job. Like whatever that looks like, it's just not always that cut and dry. And so I love how creative offers can solve problems. And I love how you're giving these suggestions because right now, I mean, there's plenty of people who paid crazy numbers in 21, 2020, 2021, 2022. I'm sure you're seeing that in your market. Hey guys, Courtney Fricky here. We've got Aussie Steve. And look, if you have a deal that needs to get moved, Southeast Louisiana, even in South Mississippi, we're your folks. We are the largest dispo company, really in the greater New Orleans area, even Southeast Louisiana. We have great contacts in South Mississippi as well. Steve, why do we move more deals than others?
just we're very deep in this market. So Greater New Orleans can be really confusing for national wholesalers. The comps are hard. We change block for block. We got flood zones. We get a lot of hurricanes and the likes, and just a lot of the national platforms don't have the buyers on their list. So we are deep with buyers, but we're deep with relationships, which is really important in this market. So we love JVing with out-of-state investors.
Like I said, we do a ton of business with other investors. So go to homebuyerlouisiana.com/Courtney, fill out the information. We'll get in touch with you and we'll move this deal along.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there's even other ways that you can help, not only help people, but then it comes back to you. I have someone right now who just signed on a master lease with me. They needed help with their rental in Colorado Springs. And this couple, by the way, is someone that I bought their house several years back. So I bought their house from them. They moved into her dad's old house when he passed away. And then they have a rental in Colorado Springs and they need help with it. So they called me, and obviously I already had their trust. I'm helping them with everything. They had a pretty big flood happen several years before I was ever even a part of their lives. And they need to get this put back together in their rental. I mean, there's windows in the basement that don't even have windows. And that, I mean, it has to get fixed. It literally cannot continue to go like this. And tens of thousands of dollars that they have to spend to fix this basement. And I don't think have the money. Like, they're talking about getting home equity lines of credit. I can step in either myself, or I have plenty of people who want to lend at 12%, and we can offer them a loan on their house. And I know how much they owe on that house. It would be a good secured loan on that house. It's another way to invest into a house and or take part ownership in something. So it's not even just exchanging for people who are in bad positions with the payment on their house with equity and stuff. It can happen with someone who almost completely owns the property, but just doesn't have the cash or the resources to get it.
So, I mean, I made a post about this. It's very, I don't want to say controversial, but like I was making the argument that like, be careful seeing real estate investing as like a way to dig yourself out of a financial pit. Because real estate investments require money from you. Like an AC can go out, we can have plumbing issues, whatever. And if you're going to put tin in there needs to be a level that you can handle that. And a lot of people don't love that because it's not the sexy, no money down. You can have no money and own all this real estate. I mean, you can get into a deal. You and I have gotten into deals, plenty of them, where it's like low to no money down. But
most of my first deals were, but you still have to have cash when the time comes.
Yeah, you have to be able to maintain it, to survive, and to stay in the game.
Yes.
And so there's plenty of people who own a property, but they're like, I can't handle a rental because that's going to demand. I can't put a tenant in there and be like, if they don't pay, even if they own it free and clear, they're like, I'm one AC issue away from having issues here. And so there's an opportunity there where it's like, look, and maybe they don't either have the credit or the ability to go get whether it's a line of credit, credit card, whatever, to kind of leverage for some of those repairs or reserves. So that's important. Speaking of, repairs, when you're doing these master leases, a lot of people are like, oh, well, if I don't own a property, that's risky. Why am I going to be doing this deal when I want ownership? What are your thoughts about doing real estate deals where you don't have an ownership stake in it?
Well, it depends on how much money I'm putting into it, but I would be put on title for it. Like, I'm going to secure that money to the property.
Yeah. So like, for example, but like even just doing a master lease where you're doing just you're leasing with the right to sublet, but you don't have any right to buy it, any ownership stake. Some people, they almost get so stuck on the idea of ownership is the only way you can make money in real estate. What are your thoughts about that as well? And we'll go back to the one about going on title when you're putting money into it.
Yeah, so the thing is if you do right by people, you don't need the paperwork to make sure you have the right to buy. I had one of my owners call me and say, hey, we're thinking of selling this property. Do you want to buy it? I said, absolutely. Would you take payments? Would you do this? And they're like, well, we need the money for this other thing over here. And I said, that doesn't work for me right now. Like, I can't pay retail for a property that's,
For an
that's just
investment.
not how I buy. Anyways, so they said, I said, so do you want me to pre-warn the tenants and get them out? Do you want to, like, what are we looking at here? And he said, no, actually, we'll just keep everything the way it is. And I said, okay. And he goes, we're going to wait until we can figure out a way for you to buy. Like, they want me to have the property. I don't ever know if that will work out. But the point behind it is that they wanted me to have the property.
Yeah.
Like, that is amazing. And it's not just that, but I get calls like that all the time. My paperwork says I have first right of refusal to purchase.
Right.
If someone really doesn't want to work with me, I probably don't want to work with them either. But when you're doing right by people,
Yep.
they want to work with
Critical.
you in the first place. And you're going to be the first person to know if they're going to sell anyway. So it's right there. You can remind them you have that first right of refusal. They're already used to getting payments from you. They already trust you. So offering good terms and payments to someone is so simple when you're in a master lease with people. Getting to that point of ownership is very simple when you're in that position with people.
You've worked your way into ownership for a lot of like so you've had master leases that were just pure master leases.
Yeah.
And then you worked your way into ownership of them over time, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I guess one of the points I want to drive home is like ownership is a great tool in real estate, but it's encompassing, benefits, but you can still make money through certain benefits like cash flow when you rent from someone in sublet, right? I mean, I have a master lease that I gave to someone who's managing one of my properties, right?
Yep.
So I was on the, owner side. It's a property I don't want to sell. There's just not a lot of great managers in that area, and I wanted someone who was an operator who would do it. And guess what? They're getting cash flow. They don't own the property. And look, the AC goes out, they call me. Like I'll take care of it. You know what I mean? Like it's not like they're responsible for, but I guess people are so fixated on control that they don't like the idea of not having 100% control. So any thoughts you want to share to that? Like the idea of someone wanting to sell underneath, from underneath you or whatever.
The thing is, I have a 5-year lease. So technically they shouldn't be able to sell until that lease is over.
Mm-hmm. Or do they have to honor that lease if
they do have to honor that 5-year lease. So the nice thing about that, and I tell them those long leases are important because I can get someone into their property, promising them long-term. As we know over the last several years, that has not been the case. A lot of people have been kicked out with only 30, 60 days notice out of homes that they've been in for a really long time. And so people value the fact that they are able to stay in one spot for a really long period of time. And if you feel that a master lease doesn't have control, in a lot of ways, I beg to differ and say that it possibly has more control than ownership. So just depending on what you do, but there is a lot of control that you can have with a master lease agreement. And the owners give me a lot of control because it takes all of the headache off of their hands. So let me tell you, when we were discussing earlier about how you have to have cash to maintain the properties you buy, you get into them for low or no down money, then you have to have cash in case something goes wrong. 100% true. So why not have some master leases that are bringing in $2,000, $4,000, $6,000, $8,000 a month over here, so that as you're getting started and you're getting into these low or no cash down deals that you're buying, you have this cash flow over here to handle whatever's wrong with the ones that you own. Can't tell you how nice that's been to have for us.
Well, and I think that's huge. I mean, I personally don't have any master leases, but I basically have some seller finance stuff that all they are is basically these notes. All they are I call them supporting characters to my main portfolio of rentals. Like their sole job is to make money. And
dip into your pocket.
Yeah, well, without demanding. Yeah, without demanding a lot. So like, the AC goes out, the insurance goes up or whatever. That is someone else's responsibility in that deal. And so, I mean, I had 2 summers ago, we had a really, really strong summer, where like the heat was just obnoxious and it was basically prematurely taking out a lot of my air conditioner units. Like just because it was just straining so hard on them.
Mhm.
Like the running joke with my AC guy was like at a certain point, after so many AC units, whether it was repairs or replacements, at a certain point you take me to dinner, right? Or you send me to Disney, right? Like that was basically the joke, right?
Using that.
Right. But like so okay, tons of that was happening. Killed my reserves, right? Because, especially for the ones that were not planned. So there's a level there that like by having this other source of income that is not, I did not, if an AC went out on one of the seller finance deals, that's not, according to the paperwork, that's not my role. And so same thing with the master leases. When it comes to repair, what does that look like for you, like typically in your master lease deals?
For like whether who
Who's
makes
responsible?
there. So what
Yeah.
I do is depending on they give me a spend limit per item, right? Like how much I can spend without contacting them. A lot of times it's 1,500 and up because they trust me. I've earned their trust. So anyway, so what'll happen is all okay, whatever the repair is, we pay for it out of a reserve that we have for that property sitting in my bank account. And then when the rent comes back in, that gets replenished before the owner gets paid. So it's technically all of the owner paying it. Now, if there's a $30,000 or $40,000 repair that's, excuse me, needing to be done, I am not signing on the dotted line for that,
Yeah.
right? We're sending that contract directly to the owner. So these are only things that the owner's reserves are going to cover that I have in my bank account and that I can
Yeah.
make sure are going to be replenished.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
think that's huge.
but there's
Yeah.
a million different ways that you can negotiate repairs. It could be that I cover the first $50 of repair work and the tenant covers the first 100. So I'm actually making a spread there, right? Um, it could be, and then they're still, they still get covered a little bit on each repair, the owners do. So that's a great way to do it. You can make it so that, hey, I'll cover a certain amount up to a stop loss every single year. It could be, hey, I'm going to be part owner in this with you from here on forward. So I will cover this much of the repair. You don't even have to worry about it. There's just so many things you can negotiate with people depending on
Right.
your level of ownership in the property.
Right. And I think it's also important. That's where the paperwork is so key. People fear control, but if you truly know how to use paperwork, you can really control things.
Yeah.
I mean, I was at lunch with a guy and I saw his hat and I actually almost bartered for his hat. But it was a Guinness one and from the Guinness brewery, up in what is that, Ireland or Scotland?
Uh-huh.
And you and I both know like the story of a lot of people know about the story of the 9,000 year lease that they have for their brewery at
Mhm.
like 45 pounds a year with 9 freaking thousand years, right? But the reality is a longer lease actually gives you control. And so it a lot of times I'm like, if you don't think that you don't like if I cannot own a property and I can control it with the
Yes.
proper paperwork. It's just
Yes.
usually people don't know the proper paperwork part, and therefore they don't know how to put themselves in a good position.
One of the guys that went to David's class that went through it just like I did, um, he ended up with a long-term master lease with somebody. The man ended up passing away. There
Oh,
was
wow.
there was no next of kin, no nothing to do with the property, but this guy has been paying the taxes. The property was paid off, so he just continued to pay taxes and insurance on it and now has no one to pay. No one's come to claim it. He just continues to take care of the property and now all of that income is his.
How long was the
Tell me
lease?
that's not control.
Yeah, how long was the lease?
I honestly don't remember, but he had
But it was like a longer
a
one.
long term, yeah.
Yeah.
And then it automatically goes to, we have it set up where it automatically renews every single year unless there's a cancellation. So technically, if that's what he did, it was a forever lease until someone cancels it. And so, but there is no next of kin. No one's ever going to cancel that. That is
Well,
forever his
and
property, just not maybe in his name.
and even from a curative title space, he has a path to ownership.
Absolutely.
And so now it's going to cost them some legal fees and maybe some other things, but nonetheless, that's wild. All right. I want to hear from one case study from you as far as you mentioned that there was a deal that someone was offering you, and I think you said there was three different creative finance strategies in it, and you still said no.
Yeah.
Tell me about that one. It was the office building. And what did that look like? Just a little short overview of it. We'll just kind of dangle it and kind of talk through that.
Well, I think as investors, we're always looking at different things, right? Like, where else can I diversify? Where else I particularly get in, I don't want to say bored because I'm not bored, but I get interested in other things. I'm like, this could
Well,
be.
so you're doing the consistent mundane. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, just talking to some people, and someone had an office building. They were like, hey, I would be willing to sell or finance this to you. And so we discussed that for months, going back and forth and running some numbers. And then I didn't know this person super well. He's like, why don't we do a master lease for the first year? And then after that, as long as we're both into this, we'll move forward with the seller financing. And I said, okay, let me paper this out a little bit more. It turned out that by year 5, when he wanted to be paid off, the amount of money that I would have had to put into this office building, because it was the sale for it was 2.7 was going to be the sales price. But the amount that I'd have to come up with at that point in 5 years, because office is a little bit fickle right now, right? And so the history in Colorado Springs is you can maybe raise rents 2% per year here. And so raising them 2% per year for the next 5 or 6 years did not get me to the point I would need to be at to get the right kind of loan on it. So the financials on it just didn't work.
Because you wanted like a retail price for it.
Yeah. And which is, we always say, I never care if someone wants retail price on their house, if they're going to give me the terms I need, right? So he just didn't want to go far enough out. But the amount I'd have to bring to the table in 5 or 6 years would have put my return on investment at like 4%, which is bleh, right? So I'm just like, nope, this isn't going to work. So it just proves that just because you're getting really cool terms doesn't necessarily mean that's what you want to get into.
I think that's so critical. I was on a podcast earlier today with someone, and I was sharing about one of the biggest misconceptions in the creative world. And it's this idea that you can overpay for everything. But there's consequences to overpaying. And it's not just your price, my terms. It's your price and with my terms within reason. Like there's got to be a level. You can't say, well, I want my price, but also this term, the 5-year, right?
Exactly. I would have done it had there been an unlimited amount of time, right? A set payment for an unlimited amount of time. Sure.
Well, and so that's where, coming back to the creative world, yes, you can build wealth or create cash flow, right? You can create let me say it that way. You can create cash flow without owning, but yet controlling properties, right?
Yep.
And then there's a way that you can work yourself into ownership. I'll be very honest, one of my main mentors, Leon Johnson, I asked him, man, I really respect this guy. He's who introduced me to Pete Fortunato. So Leon, one day I said, Leon, if you've been investing for, at this point, almost 60 years, if you were to lose it all and have to start over again, or in hindsight, knowing what all you know now, and you were to have to start from zero, like whatever that looks like, what would you do? And he said, without a hesitation, he said, I'd master lease.
100%.
Because it removes a lot of the burdens of ownership.
Yep.
Right. And I mean, like Chick-fil-A did that. I don't know if you know do you know the story of Chick-fil-A?
I don't.
So Chick-fil-A, I mean, they didn't master lease, but it was a huge part to their path. I mean, I studied them some. Obviously, they're so known for their systems and their processes, right? So they're very strategic. But early on, what they did is they used to only rent in the malls, like in the food court in the mall. And by doing that, it eliminate basically having to go, they were renting, not having to own like obviously now they own on corner shops, right? Like they build buildings and stuff. But in those early years, while they were still getting their feet underneath them, They rented inside, mall, food courts, and they got their systems down pack. And they, obviously were making money during that time. And then they expanded to the more McDonald's, get on every corner that you can type of model. And obviously they're doing proficient, but
Brilliant.
yeah, it was a huge part to their success story, right?
Mhm.
It allowed them to not choke their growth by having to, part of the startup costs include the land and the building, right? So there's something to be said about that. Let me share one more little thought here. Is I was at a meetup here in the Louisiana area, think, I don't know, 6 weeks ago or whatever. And there was a panel of guys who were like giving their review of 2024 and like talking into 2025. What are their thoughts? Well, we had like a wholesaler, we had a apartment guy, and then we had like a flipper, like there was a few different categories up there. And the apartment guy brought up master leasing and he was like, never do master leasing. And so I was like, okay, I'm in, you got my attention. Like, what's gonna follow? And he goes on to say, never do master leasing. He said, I did one on an apartment complex. And it was a value add apartment complex. And I believe he did a master lease with an option. So master leases are becoming more and more popular in the multifamily space,
Mhm.
where basically it is a form of creative financing to get into a deal. See, his issue was he did not structure it right because it needed all this work. And they basically put all this money into this master lease deal. And then they never could get, basically the market turned against them. And so when it came time to exercise it,
Financing.
they couldn't get financing. And so he was like, never, never do it. Like never, never do a master lease. I was like, bro, or number one, be careful doing it in, the multifamily space, especially on a short term.
Mhm.
And then, also be careful doing on a big value, like a value add. So same thing, let's take it back down to single family. If someone had a, gutted house, they're like, hey, I'll rent it to you for, $600 a month and it could rent for 2,300 a month, but it's a full gut. No way in hell I would do that deal unless it was some other, deal structure involved.
You got some equity with it.
Exactly.
Yep, same.
And
100%.
so
That's too much risk.
well, there's a level there that it's also like, again, you don't want to get so blinded just because someone's open to terms doesn't mean it's a good deal.
100.
And similar to your office deal, like things like that. And so you have built a impressive portfolio in a short amount of time. One of the things I love, so I'm going to wrap this up asking you some questions about DIY landlording. One of the big reasons people call you is because you're proficient at managing tenants.
Mhm.
So proficient it only takes you, 2 or so hours a week. Um, whether someone's a property manager and it's not like you're managing 10 doors as well. So
Between 60 and 70 at any time.
yeah, so you're managing 60 to 70 doors and you're only putting in that amount of time. There's going to be a property manager listening to this or a landlord listening to this being like, excuse me, you missed, a 0 or 2 behind that number each week. Um, what are some of your thoughts if someone wants to manage their own property, just not even on the master leasing side, just in general? What are some of the key things you would tell someone who's looking at managing their own properties?
Obviously, number one is get connected to people who can keep you up on the laws because they're coming at us fast and furious. You have to know in this landscape what you are doing. And if you don't, it can cost you a lot of money. So I'm going to pound that home where you have to know the laws. You do something wrong in the wrong state and it can cost you tens of thousands of dollars. Okay. You can get sued. Some of these tenants know what they're doing. And I kind of want to segue that into think about doing the master leases and obviously still know what you're doing with the laws there. But when I got started, the things that I learned from being a landlord allowed me to accumulate, I believe, my portfolio quicker. I have heard time and time again that someone either wants the whole house all to themselves, or they need to own the house, which we've brought up several times today. They don't get enough from master leasing or whatever the case is. You start with master leasing, all of a sudden you're gonna learn all of your numbers. You're going to learn rental numbers. You're going to learn repair numbers. You're going to be able to go into a full flip and probably understand most of what's going to go into that.
Mm-hmm.
So when you know all those things, a lot of fear for buying property goes away. You don't have to call anybody. You have this stuff in your head. You know exactly what to do with the property. And it goes right into your rental portfolio or right into your leasing portfolio, no matter what that first whatever the purchase looks like, whether it's a lease purchase, a master lease, a flip and a burr, whatever. The end game is over here and it goes right into your system. So I honestly believe, because I always knew that back end system so well and I knew my numbers so well because of the master leasing, because of being a landlord, that I was able to say yes or no quicker and I knew what I was doing and I wasn't afraid. So I was able to grow my portfolio quicker. Can't tell you how many times I've had someone say, oh, I'm just looking for that right property, but they're so afraid of making a mistake, they never buy that first property. Where doing a master lease, all that fear should go away. You go ahead and you figure, it's a little more forgiving. You can figure things out as you go.
Yeah.
And so that allows you to, in my opinion, grow your own portfolio a lot quicker.
And I think that's huge. You started off by talking about the laws. I mean, that is so huge. I tell people all the time, go get trained. If you're going to manage your own properties, go get trained in fair housing.
Yeah. Oh,
I mean, my last W-2 was in property management, and it was with a company that was under a consent decree because they had violated the fair housing. And so I only knew someone who was in trouble from it, and it was hefty fees and a ton of education, like required trainings that they had to do.
yeah.
And I think that's one of the biggest things that I see people do wrong all the time. That
Mhm.
I think, especially because it's on a federal level, you get tenants who like they know what's up. Like they're gonna they'll catch you the minute you're like, hey, great place for a family, or a single mom or an older couple to downsize or whatever. Like you can't do that. That's illegal, right? So
Yeah.
not only should it be on the federal level, stuff like fair housing and whatnot, but it should be also on the local level. And
Yep.
this is why it's really important to, when you choose your market, to know what you're getting into. Real quick, what's been happening in Colorado the last 12 to 18 months, whatever it's been?
I just got goosebumps everywhere. So it's gotten pretty rough around here. So not only, I'm not even going to talk about the legislation that's on the docket for this year, but we can no longer non-renew. I mean, this is the big one that's happened with Colorado. We cannot non-renew with people. So what that means is if they have not done anything to be evicted and we're going to continue to rent the house, they get first right of refusal to rent it, even if you don't get along, even if you don't want them in there anymore. We used to say, hey, our lease is up, we're not renewing, you can move on. We can no longer do that. We have to allow them to
So,
stay.
so you have to have, like, basically it has to be from either a lease violation or from a non-rent payment.
Correct. Yeah. And then if they want to stay and they fight you on that, you're going to have to take that to court. The sucky thing with the lease violation part of it, the non-monetary, is the proof.
Yeah, okay.
Because
Yeah.
good luck, there were times I would go over to this house, I knew stuff was going on, and there was nothing that was so bad that I was going to be able to take it to court and get them out. I had to play the game in a way that I was a pain in a way that I got them to fire me. Let's put it that way, so that they would leave.
I think I think at the end of the day, so you guys in Colorado are seeing a ton of legislation that has been passed as well as being proposed that has gone from a landlord friendly state to very tenant friendly
Oh yeah, very
very
quick.
quickly. Yeah, very quickly. To the point that I think I heard David Tilney say that he doesn't know if he would recommend anyone buying in Colorado at this point. Like, obviously he's owned there for 30, 40, 50 years or whatever it's been. But like, and at this point, he owns, the majority, if not all of his portfolios down there. But like, there's a level that it's scary, right? Like, and so,
100%.
and that level of involvement on long-term rentals, and like obviously to a point that if you and like a tenant and you were not a good fit, like having a very hard time getting them out of your house if they're continuing to pay. Obviously you're gonna have to get creative, or it could be hard.
It's another one of those things that you asked me what you need to do if you're planning on doing this. And another one is learn to be a leader. And that comes along with not just being a good leader for your tenants, but you're going to have those boogers that get through no matter how much you scream. You then have to be enough of a leader for yourself to not do the things that you knee-jerk want to do to those tenants, right? Because it's, again,
Right.
it's not going to benefit you in the long run, right? So your knee-jerk reaction to charge them for something or to stick it
Remove the doors or turn off the utilities or like,
to them when you were right, and you have to give in and give them their money back, even though you were right. Little stuff like that, just to keep your nose clean, is
yeah.
really hard to do. So you have to really have a powerful internal compass, I guess I would say, to make
Yeah.
sure that you know that you're doing this for your own benefit and the owner's benefit at the very least.
Well, and this is also really important is like, for example, even just some of the technical stuff, not even the bad stuff. It's like tenant moves out. I know in the state of Louisiana, you've got to return a deposit within 30 days,
Yeah.
right? Like, but if you're going to DIY landlord, you basically please, what I'm gonna say here is don't become, don't landlord and manage for yourself and not go educate yourself.
Mhm.
Because like at that point, I mean, there's things that you have to do that you have to follow within the laws, and how else are you going to learn them?
Yep.
And so go and take, and it may be you go spend the time and learn it. You spend money and time, right? Otherwise, you're not going, if you don't do it, you may run the risk of getting fined or sued or whatever, and then you're just going to be spending the money and time on that. Education is expensive, but so, try ignorance, right? Like,
100%.
so, all right.
Learn from the strictest states. Go learn the laws in California and Colorado, and then you'll probably be okay in your own state. And that's not a joke. I truly mean that. The other thing is I don't want to scare people away from doing this because I think it's a beautiful thing. Like,
Right.
yes, you need to know. I didn't know everything when I got started, Courtney. I didn't know it all, but I joined the
Right.
groups that did. So I had the people there to bounce the questions off of when I needed to. Or when something got upgraded or a new law came in, I was made aware without having to go search it out every time.
Yeah.
Those
No,
are
and I think that's huge.
sorry, go ahead. Yeah. Don't be
Yeah,
afraid to start. And you don't have to know it all
absolutely.
before you start.
No, and I think that's huge. You absolutely have to start. But then there's one of those things people always like, well, how do I know if I'm doing things right? Go get around people who are already doing it, right? Like you absolutely do not have to have it all figured out. Go learn steps 1 to 3 and go get around people who are doing steps 5 to 10, and they can help, that they're a little bit further down the path and they can
Yep.
help. And look, I mean, I went to an investor meetup lunch today. And it was a brand new meetup that was starting that was at lunchtime, which I was like, I love that because I know the evenings can be hard for people. So that gives people one less excuse,
Yes.
right? And so like when the guy was putting it on, I was like, hell yeah, I'll be there and support because I want people to have access, right? So whether it's watching stuff like a podcast like this or a YouTube channel or going to the local RIAs or whatnot, or reading books, attending workshops, things along those lines. So as we start to wrap up here, I just want to encourage folks that ownership, having the money to buy real estate, don't let that stop you.
Yeah.
I often say that the current deals you do are a direct reflection of your mindset, which is what you believe is possible, and what you believe you can do, but also a direct reflection of your skill set, what you can actually make happen.
Yeah.
And so if the deals you're doing, which may be none or maybe some, are limited, and you want to do different ones like a master lease and things like that, then you need to expand your mindset, which what you're doing now listening to this podcast, but also expand your skill set. Go learn how to take this information and be able to put it into like instruction and application.
Yeah.
And so I know that you are passionate about teaching people, the concept of master leasing as well as landlording, specifically along the lines of your systems. So as we start to wrap up here, what is the best place that people can get in touch with you, whether to learn from you further, like whenever you do your workshops, or your content or whatever it looks like that?
Go to www.cleverkittyinvesting.com. That's cleverkittyinvesting.com.
I'll put
There's
it in the show
a story
notes.
behind that name, but anyways, so yeah, I have my courses on there. They can get a hold of me with questions, get on there for newsletters, all that good kind of stuff. So that's how they can get in touch with me. I'm also on social media. You can look up Lindsey Jensen or Clever Kitty Investing on Facebook and some other platforms. I'm not as active on other platforms, but
Sure.
but they can find me on Facebook.
Awesome. Any last thoughts before we wrap up here?
No, go out there and kill it. Go learn what you need to learn to get started. There's no excuse. You can do any of this, no money down, but go learn what you're doing first.
I love it. I love it. And look, guys, maybe you're like, hey, I've been, the last few years have been really hard because insurance has gone up, or, interest rates are high, or whatever. There might be some people listening to this who have a portfolio and who may say, I'm going to learn how to do these master leases just so I have basically a portfolio of leases that I master lease, just to have income to support my portfolio that may be struggling right now.
Yeah.
Like who knows? And so, guys, I want you to be inspired. I want you to hear about these different aspects. It does not have to be this, trendy look. All the rental arbitrage are not talking right now, because let's be honest, a lot of the short-term rental people are not even talking right now. They're not making as much noise. Why? Because they're, the short-term rental has taken a hit. That market has taken it. It is absolutely, some people are still killing it. But at the same time, I just want you to know this rental arbitrage, this master leases, which is really the technical name for it. It's not dead. It's just, you just only heard about the squeakiest wheel, which was, the short-term rentals. And so Lindsey is proof that you absolutely can rent properties from other landlords who don't want to manage the headaches of tenants and all that. And you can actually sublet them and build in a spread that can be a fantastic source of income as well as a way into ownership. And so, Lindsey, I'm always so inspired by your story, and I appreciate you sharing with me today.
Thanks for having me, Courtney. I love being around you always.
Oh, always, always. All right, thanks, guys. I'm gonna put her website, Clever Kitty, and some of her socials in the show notes. Make sure to check those out. Thank you guys once again for tuning in to another episode of the Strategic Success Podcast. Catch you guys next time.